The morning sun cast long shadows across the terraformed fields of Kepler. 442b, when the first wave of alien ships descended from the purple-tinged sky. Sarah Chun was tending to the hydroponic gardens in Sector 7 when the emergency sirens began their haunting wail across New Shanghai Colony. She dropped her nutrient scanner, watching in stunned silence as sleek, obsidian vessels emerged from the cloud cover like predatory birds circling wounded prey. The Zephyrian fleet had arrived without warning, their ships moving with the fluid grace of creatures born in the void between stars. Admiral Thexkar stood on the bridge of the flagship Void Render, his 4 arms crossed as he surveyed the human settlement below. His species had conquered 47 worlds in the past century, each victory swift and decisive. Humans, he had been told, were a young species barely capable of interstellar travel. This would be another routine subjugation. "Begin the bombardment," Thexkar commanded, his translator converting his clicking speech into standard galactic. "Target their power grid and communication arrays first." Standard protocol. The first energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking the colony's fusion reactor with surgical precision. The protective dome flickered and died, leaving the settlement exposed to the alien atmosphere's harsh radiation. Emergency lights bathed the streets in crimson as colonists ran for the underground shelters their ancestors had insisted on building, despite the peaceful nature of this outer rim world. Dr. Marcus Webb, the colony's administrator, burst into the command center as reports flooded in from across the settlement. "How many ships?" he demanded, his weathered face grim as he watched the tactical display update in real time. 37 confirmed contacts," replied Lieutenant Torres, her fingers flying over the communication console. "They've jammed our long-range transmitters, but I managed to get a burst transmission to the nearest relay station before they cut us off." Webb nodded grimly. The message would take 3 days to reach Earth, and help was weeks away at best. New Shanghai Colony housed nearly 50,000 civilians, including children born on this world who had never seen the blue skies of humanity's homeworld. They were on their own. The Zephyrians had developed their conquest doctrine over millennia of expansion across the galaxy's outer spiral arms. Their strategy was brutally efficient: destroy infrastructure, eliminate resistance, and subjugate the survivors. Most species surrendered within hours once their military was neutralized. The few that resisted were systematically exterminated as examples to others. Thexkar watched the tactical display with satisfaction as his forces deployed in textbook formation. The human settlement's pathetic defensive grid had already collapsed under the initial bombardment. Soon, ground forces would land to secure the colony and begin the process of cataloging human capabilities for the hegemony's databases. "Sir," reported Subcommander Vextal from the sensor station, "we're detecting movement in the lower levels of their structures. It appears the humans have retreated to underground positions." "Expected," Thexkar replied with the confidence of experience. "Deploy hunting packs to the surface. Drive them out or bury them. Either outcome serves our purposes." But deep beneath New Shanghai Colony, in reinforced bunkers that extended far below the city's foundations, something unexpected was happening. The humans weren't cowering in terror, as intelligence reports had suggested they would. Instead, they were organizing. Sarah Chun found herself in Bunker Complex Alpha alongside 200 other colonists, including farmers, engineers, teachers, and retired veterans from Earth's old conflicts. The space hummed with quiet efficiency as people sorted supplies, checked weapons, and established communication networks between the various underground facilities. "Listen up, everyone," called out Colonel James Park, a grizzled man in his 60s who had served in the Martian Independence War 3 decades earlier. Despite being officially retired, old habits died hard, and the colonists naturally looked to him for leadership. "We all know why we're here. Those things up there think they can just walk in and take our home." A younger voice called out from the crowd. "Colonel, what chance do we have? There are thousands of them, and they have warships." Park's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. "Son, You're thinking like someone who's never had a fight for anything that mattered. See, there's something those aliens don't understand about humans. We're not like the other species they've conquered. When someone threatens our families, our homes, our children, we don't calculate odds. We fight. The bunker fell silent except for the distant rumble of alien landing craft touching down on the surface above. Park continued, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won experience. Every human settlement in frontier space was built by people who looked at impossible odds and decided to try anyway. Our ancestors crossed oceans in wooden boats, survived ice ages with stone tools, and reached for the stars when everyone said it was impossible. That's not courage, people. That's who we are. Miles away in Bunker Complex Delta, Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins was conducting an inventory of their improvised arsenal. As the colony's chief engineer, she had insisted on certain redundancies in their infrastructure that were now proving invaluable. Hidden beneath maintenance panels and disguised as environmental systems were weapons caches, communication arrays, and manufacturing equipment that the aliens' orbital scans had missed entirely. "We've got enough small arms for 800 people," she reported to the assembled group leaders via encrypted channel, "plus enough raw materials to manufacture more ammunition and explosives for at least 3 months, assuming we can hold the fabrication centers." The response came from Park in Complex Alpha. "Good. What about the industrial sections?" "The aliens haven't found the deep tunnels yet. Our mining equipment is still operational, and the geothermal taps are functioning. If we can establish a secure perimeter, we can keep essential systems running indefinitely." This was information that would have shocked the Zephyrian intelligence analysts had they possessed it. Their pre-invasion surveys had identified New Shanghai Colony as a typical agricultural settlement with minimal industrial capacity. They had no idea that every human colony was designed with hard-learned lessons from centuries of conflict, natural disasters, and the unforgiving nature of space itself. Above ground, Zephyrian shock troops moved through the abandoned streets with the confidence of predators who had never encountered serious resistance. Their exoskeletons gleamed in the alien sunlight as they methodically searched buildings, following standard protocols for flushing out survivors. Captain Zekra led her hunting pack through what appeared to be a residential district, her 4 eyes scanning for any sign of human activity. The intelligence briefings had described humans as physically weak, technologically inferior, and prone to panic under pressure. Nothing she observed contradicted those assessments. "Nest leader, this is Pack 7, she reported. "Sector clear. No resistance encountered. Beginning descent to lower levels." What happened next would be analyzed and debated by military historians for generations to come. As the Zephyrian squad descended into what they assumed was a civilian shelter, they triggered a cascade of events that revealed the fundamental miscalculation underlying their entire invasion strategy. The first explosion came from a carefully placed improvised device that sealed the access tunnel behind them. The second took out their communication equipment. The third eliminated their heavy weapons specialist. In the space of 30 seconds, an elite alien shock squad found themselves trapped in a maze of tunnels with limited ammunition, no backup, and facing an enemy that had apparently vanished into the walls themselves. Sarah Chun pressed herself against the maintenance shaft wall as alien voices echoed through the passage below. She had volunteered for tunnel duty despite having no military experience, driven by the simple knowledge that her daughter attended the colony school 3 levels up. The thought of those things reaching the children's shelter gave her a cold clarity that surprised her. She activated the timer on the charges Dr. Hawkins had taught her to prepare, then began crawling through the ventilation system toward the next checkpoint. Behind her, the aliens' confident advance turned into confused shouting as their formation encountered the first of many nasty surprises the colonists had prepared. The humans had turned their entire underground complex into a 3-dimensional battlefield that played to every advantage their smaller size and intimate knowledge of the terrain provided. Maintenance shafts became sniper positions. Storage areas became ambush points. Even the recycling systems have been weaponized, flooding chosen sections with everything from superheated steam to caustic industrial chemicals. But it was more than just tactics or terrain that gave the humans their edge. It was something the Zephyrian military doctrine had never accounted for: the psychological difference between a species fighting for conquest and one fighting for survival. Colonel Park monitored the battle from his command post, watching as alien forces that should have overwhelmed the human defenders instead found themselves drawn into a grinding, brutal campaign where every meter was paid for in blood. The aliens had superior technology, better training, and overwhelming numerical advantage. But they were fighting according to a playbook written for enemies who would eventually surrender. "Sir," reported Sergeant Kim over the comm system, "Pac-12 has retreated from Section C7. They lost 4 soldiers to booby traps and took casualties from crossfire. They're calling for artillery support." Park nodded grimly. "Let them. We're deep enough that orbital bombardment will just seal more tunnels. And every minute they waste on us is another minute for word to spread." That was the other factor the Zephyrian command had failed to consider. Humans had a disturbing tendency to communicate. Even as New Shanghai Colony fought for survival, the story of their resistance was spreading through hyperspace communication networks, reaching human worlds across dozens of star systems. Admiral Thexkar studied the tactical reports with growing frustration. What should have been a 4-hour mop-up operation had stretched into its second day with no end in sight. His ground forces were requesting reinforcements, medical support, and increasingly exotic forms of artillery to deal with what the initial surveys had described as agricultural workers with minimal defensive capability. "Subcommander," he called to his intelligence officer, "review the pre-invasion assessment of human combat capabilities." Vextal's membrane fluttered nervously as he accessed the files. "Sir, Galactic Intelligence rated humans as Category 4 combatants. Low technology, minimal military tradition, poor unit cohesion under stress. Average conquest time estimated at 6 to 12 hours. Then, explain to me why my veteran shock troops are being systematically eliminated by farmers armed with improvised weapons." The question hung in the air of the flagship's bridge, carrying implications that extended far beyond a single colonial world. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Thexkar was beginning to suspect that the hegemony's intelligence apparatus had made a fundamental error in its assessment of this young species. Down in the tunnels of New Shanghai Colony, Sarah Chun reloaded her improvised weapon and prepared for the next wave. She had never considered herself a soldier, but something primal had awakened in her when the aliens had threatened everything she loved. Around her, ordinary people had transformed into something their enemies couldn't understand or predict. Humans with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The battle for New Shanghai Colony was just beginning, but already its echoes were rippling across the galaxy. Other human worlds were mobilizing their defenses. Military planners on Earth were dusting off contingency protocols that hadn't been activated since the species' bloodiest conflicts. And somewhere in the vast communication networks that linked human space, a simple message was being transmitted to every colony, every outpost, every ship. New Shanghai holds. The line is drawn here. The Zephyrian hegemony had attacked a human world expecting easy conquest. Instead, they had awakened something they didn't understand and couldn't control. They had learned the first lesson about humanity the hard way. Humans never surrender when their families are threatened. But there were other lessons coming, each one more costly than the last. The real war was just beginning. Admiral Thexkar stood in his private quarters aboard the Voidrender, staring at the holographic display of New Shanghai Colony. Red indicators marked areas where his forces had encountered resistance, and there were far too many of them. What should have been a simple pacification operation had become a nightmare of urban warfare that defied every tactical principle his species had developed over millennia of conquest. The door chimed, and Subcommander Vextal entered carrying a data tablet. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty that Thexkar found deeply unsettling. Report, the Admiral commanded, not taking his eyes off the tactical display. Sir, our casualty reports from the surface operations are significant. We've lost 37% of the initial landing force, with another 20% wounded and requesting medical evacuation. The humans are employing tactics that our doctrine manuals don't address. Thexkar finally turned to face his subordinate. Elaborate. Vextal activated the tablet, projecting battlefield recordings into the air between them. They're not fighting to win territory, sir. They're fighting to inflict maximum casualties regardless of their own losses. Watch this engagement from Sector 7. The hologram showed a Zephyrian assault squad advancing through what appeared to be an abandoned commercial district. Everything proceeded according to standard urban warfare protocols until the humans struck. But instead of the quick ambush and withdrawal that characterized most species resistance movements, the humans had essentially turned themselves into weapons. A human fighter emerged from cover, not to engage in a firefight, but to physically tackle a Zephyrian soldier while detonating an explosive device that killed them both. Another sequence showed humans using their own bodies to block escape routes, while their comrades eliminated entire squads with carefully placed charges. Most disturbing of all was footage of humans deliberately exposing themselves to enemy fire to draw Zephyrian forces into prepared kill zones. They're treating their own lives as expendable resources, Vextal observed, his voice carrying a note of something the Zephyrian language had no proper word for: horror at the concept of voluntary self-sacrifice. Thexkar studied the recordings with the analytical mind that had made him one of the hegemony's most successful commanders. These aren't random acts of desperation. There's coordination here. They're implementing these tactics systematically across multiple fronts. Yes, sir. Our psychological warfare specialists are baffled. According to their models, a species under this level of stress should be experiencing mass surrender by now. Instead, human resistance is actually intensifying. 3 days into what was supposed to be a brief conquest, Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins was discovering capabilities she never knew she possessed. The colony's engineering chief had transformed the underground complex into something that resembled a fusion of fortress and factory, where civilians worked alongside improvised soldiers to produce weapons, explosives, and the tools of prolonged resistance. The aliens are adapting to our tunnel networks, she reported to Colonel Park over their encrypted communication system. They're bringing in smaller units with better sensors. We need to adjust our tactics. Park's response came through clearly despite the interference from alien jamming equipment. What do you recommend? We go deeper. The mining tunnels extend for kilometers beyond the main complex. We can establish secondary bases in the geothermal sections where their sensors can't penetrate effectively. But that means abandoning the upper levels. Do it. We always knew this was going to be a fighting withdrawal. The longer we hold out, the more time Earth Command has to mobilize a response. What neither human nor alien fully understood yet was that the conflict on New Shanghai Colony had already achieved something far more significant than tactical delay. Across human space, the news of the invasion and the colonists' refusal to surrender had triggered a response that the Zephyrian intelligence apparatus had catastrophically underestimated. Captain Maria Santos of the cargo hauler Free Trader was 3 days out from the Centauri system when the emergency broadcast reached her ship. She listened to the crackling transmission with the focused attention of someone who had spent decades navigating the dangerous spaces between human worlds. This is New Shanghai Colony Emergency Command to all human vessels. We are under attack by alien forces of unknown origin. Colony defense forces are holding, but require immediate assistance. Repeat, this is not a drill. Human colony under alien attack. Santos stared at the communication display for a long moment, then activated her ship's general intercom. All hands to stations. We're changing course. Her first officer, David Chun, no relation to Sarah Chun fighting in the tunnels below, looked up from his navigation console with confusion. Captain, We're a merchant vessel. We don't have weapons or military training. Santos was already plotting a new course toward New Shanghai. No, but we have something better. We have cargo holds full of industrial equipment, a crew that knows how to improvise, and 4 months of emergency supplies. Sometimes the most important thing you can bring to a fight isn't weapons. It's proof that someone's coming. Across human space, similar decisions were being made. Independent traders, corporate executives, retired military personnel, and ordinary citizens were receiving the same emergency broadcast and reaching the same conclusion. If humans were under attack, then every human had a stake in the outcome. The response that emerged wasn't coordinated by any central authority or military command. It was something far more fundamental, the spontaneous mobilization of a species that had learned, over millennia of conflict and survival, that safety came from standing together when threatened. Commander Sarah Mitchell of the Earth Defense Force destroyer Indomitable was conducting routine patrol exercises in the outer system when her communications officer received an encrypted priority message from Fleet Command. She read the contents twice before calling her senior staff to the bridge. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation. 72 hours ago, an unknown alien force attacked New Shanghai Colony. The colonists are holding, but intelligence suggests this may be the beginning of a larger campaign against human space." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of ship systems. Mitchell continued, her voice carrying the weight of decisions that would echo across the galaxy. "Fleet Command is mobilizing everything we have, but our nearest battle group is 2 weeks away from New Shanghai. However, the aliens don't know that. Mr. Constantine, plot a course for the New Shanghai system. Maximum acceleration. Ms. Park, prepare to transmit a message on all alien frequencies." "What message, Captain?" asked the communications officer. Mitchell smiled grimly. "Tell them that the Earth Defense Force is en route, and that they have 24 hours to withdraw from human space. After that, we consider them hostile combatants." "Captain," her tactical officer interrupted, "we're one destroyer against an unknown number of alien warships. That message is essentially a bluff." "Yes, it is. But here's the thing about bluffs. Sometimes the other side doesn't know you're bluffing." Back on New Shanghai Colony, the effects of this coordinated human response were beginning to manifest in ways the Zephyrian Command couldn't understand. Somehow, despite their complete control of orbital space and their jamming of communication networks, human morale wasn't collapsing. If anything, it seemed to be strengthening. Sarah Chun had been fighting for 3 days without real sleep, sustained by emergency rations and the knowledge that her daughter was safe in the deepest shelter levels. She had killed alien soldiers with improvised explosives, survived bombardments that should have collapsed entire tunnel sections, and watched ordinary people perform acts of heroism that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. "Sarah, take 5, called out Lieutenant Torres, the former communications officer who had become something like a combat coordinator for their sector. "You've been on point for 6 hours straight." Sarah slumped against a tunnel wall, finally, allowing exhaustion to catch up with her. "How are we still alive?" she asked, more to herself than to Torres. The question was overheard by Dr. Hawkins, who was passing through with a team of volunteers carrying supplies. "Because we're not fighting the way they expected," she answered. "Every species they've conquered before fought to preserve their forces. We're fighting to make victory too expensive to achieve." It was a distinction that went to the heart of human nature in a way that alien psychologists had failed to grasp. Humans were unique among known sapient species in their willingness to engage in conflict where individual survival was secondary to group success. It wasn't that other species lacked courage or determination, but rather that humanity had evolved under conditions that made such extreme cooperation adaptive. Dr. Zinthara, the Zephyrian hegemony's leading expert on xenopsychology, was reviewing battlefield reports with growing alarm. As the foremost authority on conquered species behavior patterns, she had advised the military that human resistance would collapse within 48 hours once casualties reached 15% of their population. The reality was proving devastatingly different. Human casualties were approaching 30% in some sectors, yet resistance was actually intensifying. Worse, intercepted human communications showed no signs of surrender negotiations or factional breakdown. Instead, the humans seemed to be treating their losses as motivation for greater effort. "This is unprecedented," she reported to the Hegemony Council via hyperspace transmission. "Every model we have suggests that human resistance should have collapsed by now. Instead, we're seeing behavior patterns that don't match any known sapient species." The response from the homeworlds was predictable. Continue analysis. Identify weaknesses. Victory must be achieved quickly to prevent this resistance from spreading to other human worlds. But Zinthara was beginning to suspect that the fundamental assumption underlying Zephyrian conquest doctrine might be flawed. They had always assumed that sapient species would behave rationally, weighing costs and benefits to make logical decisions about surrender versus resistance. Humans appear to be operating according to different principles entirely. The breakthrough came when she analyzed communication intercepts from the human tunnels. Instead of the desperate pleas for mercy or factional disputes that characterized most species under extreme pressure, human communications showed something else entirely. They were making plans for the future. Colonists trapped in underground bunkers, facing overwhelming odds and certain death, were discussing what lessons their resistance might teach other human worlds. They were treating their own survival as less important than the knowledge that their struggle might help their species as a whole. It was, from a purely rational perspective, completely insane. And it was working. Admiral Thexkar received DR. Zinthara's preliminary report while overseeing the latest assault on the human tunnel complex. The implications were staggering. If humans were willing to fight to extinction rather than surrender, then the entire hegemony expansion strategy would need to be reconsidered. "Sir," called out his tactical officer, "we're receiving transmissions from the edge of the system. It appears human warships are approaching." Thexkar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service: uncertainty. "How many ships?" "Unknown, sir. They're transmitting on multiple frequencies and from multiple vectors. It could be a single vessel using deception tactics, or it could be a full battle fleet." The admiral stared at the tactical display, weighing his options. A rational enemy would have surrendered days ago, allowing him to consolidate his position before human reinforcements arrived. Instead, the colonists had forced him to commit his entire fleet to a grinding surface battle that had already cost him more casualties than the previous 10 conquests combined. And now, with his forces tied down planetside and his ships depleted by constant ground support operations, he was facing the arrival of unknown human military assets. The situation had gone from a routine conquest to a potential disaster. "Prepare the fleet for possible engagement," he ordered, and sent a message to Hegemony Command. "Tell them we may have seriously underestimated human military capabilities." The message that went out from the new Shanghai system that day would fundamentally change the Zephyrian hegemony's approach to expansion. For the first time in their recorded history, they had encountered a species that fought not just for victory, but for principles that transcended immediate survival. In the tunnels below New Shanghai Colony, Sarah Chun and thousands of other ordinary humans continued their impossible fight, unaware that their resistance was already reshaping the balance of power across the galaxy. They fought not because they expected to win, but because surrender was simply not an option when their families and their freedom were at stake. The aliens had expected to face soldiers. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous: humans defending their home. The free trader dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Shanghai system 12 hours ahead of the Earth Defense Force destroyer Indomitable. Captain Maria Santos stared at the tactical display showing alien ships in orbital positions around the colony world, her weathered hands gripping the armrests of her command chair. 37 alien vessels confirmed, reported her sensor operator. They're maintaining bombardment positions over the primary colony site. I'm detecting ongoing ground combat operations. Santos nodded grimly. Any sign they've detected us? Negative. We're running silent and cold. Our cargo configuration is masking our drive signature. The merchant captain activated her ship's internal communication system. All hands, this is Santos. We knew this was a long shot when we started. The aliens have the colonists pinned down, but they're still fighting. That means they're still alive, and it means we might be able to help. She paused, looking around at the faces of her crew. There were traders and engineers, not soldiers, but every one of them had volunteered for this mission when they learned about the attack on New Shanghai. We can't fight those warships, but we can do something else. We can let those people know they're not alone. Mr. Chun, prepare to launch the communication drones. Full broadcast on all human frequencies. Below on the planet's surface, Sarah Chun was leading a team through the deepest mining tunnels when her emergency communicator crackled to life. The voice that emerged through the static was speaking standard English with a distinctive accent from the outer trade routes. New Shanghai Colony. This is Captain Santos of the merchant vessel Free Trader. We received your distress call. We're here, and we're not leaving. More ships are coming. Hold the line. The effect of that simple message was immediate and profound. Throughout the tunnel complex, exhausted fighters paused in their preparations to listen to proof that the outside universe still existed and still cared about their fate. For the first time in days, some of the colonists actually smiled. Unknown vessel, came a response from Colonel Park. This is New Shanghai Defense Command. We're still operational, and we're still fighting. Be advised, the aliens have complete orbital control. You're in extreme danger. Santos's laugh carried clearly through the communication channel. Colonel, I've been running cargo through pirate space for 20 years. If some overgrown squids think they can scare off a human merchant, they've got another thing coming. We're broadcasting your resistance to every human world within 50 light years. The word is getting out. What Santos didn't mention was that her ship's communication drones were doing more than just carrying news of the battle. They were also transmitting detailed tactical intelligence about Zephyrian ship positions, weapon capabilities, and operational patterns to the approaching Earth Defense Force vessels. Admiral Thexkar was reviewing casualty reports when his communications officer interrupted with news that would change the entire strategic situation. Sir, we've detected an unauthorized vessel in the outer system. It appears to be a human cargo ship, but it's broadcasting on multiple frequencies and deploying some kind of communication satellites. Thexkar felt his four stomachs tighten with unease. Are there other human ships in the system? Unknown, sir. Our long-range sensors are detecting multiple hyperspace distortions that could indicate incoming vessels, but we can't determine their exact number or configuration. The Admiral stared at the tactical display, realizing that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. What had begun as a simple conquest operation was becoming something unprecedented in Zephyrian military history. A prolonged engagement against an enemy that refused to behave according to established patterns. Dispatch a patrol squadron to investigate that merchant vessel, he ordered. But maintain our primary formation. If human warships are approaching, we'll need our full strength to engage them. The decision to divide his forces would prove to be one of the most costly mistakes in Zephyrian military history. Commander Sarah Mitchell aboard the EDF destroyer Indomitable was studying the intelligence data being transmitted by Santos's communication drones when her tactical officer made an observation that would reshape her entire battle plan. Captain, the aliens are repositioning to investigate that merchant vessel. They're pulling 6 ships out of their orbital formation. Mitchell smiled coldly. Mr. Constantine, adjust our approach vector. I want to enter the system from the same direction as their patrol squadron. Ms. Park, prepare to transmit a message to the alien fleet on all frequencies. Yes, Captain. What should we tell them? Tell them that they have violated human space and committed acts of war against human civilians. Inform them that Earth Defense Force is now in command of this system and that they have one chance to surrender unconditionally. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew that a single destroyer stood no realistic chance against the alien fleet, but there was something in their captain's tone that suggested she had a plan beyond simple bravado. "Captain," asked the tactical officer, "what if they call our bluff?" Mitchell's smile widened. "Then, we teach them why you should never threaten human families." The message that went out across the new Shanghai system was broadcast on every frequency the Indomitable could access, ensuring that both the alien fleet and the human colonists below would hear it clearly. "Attention, Zephyrian vessels. This is Commander Sarah Mitchell of the Earth Defense Force Destroyer Indomitable. You have committed acts of war against human space and human civilians. This system is now under Earth Defense Force protection. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures, or we will consider you hostile combatants and respond accordingly." Admiral Thexkar listened to the transmission with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect for the human commander's audacity. A single destroyer challenging his entire fleet was either the action of someone completely insane or someone who possessed information he lacked. "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "we're detecting one human warship on approach vector 77 Mark II. Configuration matches their standard destroyer class. No escorts detected. One ship." Thexkar's voice carried a note of incredulity. "They're challenging a full invasion fleet with one destroyer?" "Yes, sir." "Should we respond to their ultimatum?" Thexkar considered his options. The rational response would be to ignore the human vessel and continue with ground operations. But something about the situation felt wrong. Human behavior throughout this engagement had consistently defied Zephyrian predictions. Was this another example of their incomprehensible tactical thinking? Or was there something his intelligence apparatus had missed? "Open a channel to the human vessel," he decided. "Let's see what they think they're accomplishing." The response that came back would be analyzed by military historians for centuries to come, not for its tactical sophistication, but for its insight into the fundamental differences between species that conquered for expansion and species that fought for survival. "Admiral Thexkar," came Commander Mitchell's voice, somehow managing to sound both respectful and utterly implacable. "I assume you're wondering why one human destroyer would challenge your entire fleet. The answer is simple: because someone has to. Because those are human citizens you're attacking down there, and as long as one human ship remains operational, we will continue to defend them." She paused, and when she continued, her tone carried the weight of absolute conviction. "You've made a fundamental error in your assessment of human nature. You assume that rational beings will surrender when faced with impossible odds. But humans aren't rational when our families are threatened. We're something much more dangerous than rational. We're determined." Thexkar found himself in the unprecedented position of being lectured on military philosophy by an enemy commander whose forces were outnumbered 37-1. More disturbing was the realization that her words carried an undertone of certainty that suggested she knew something he didn't. "Commander Mitchell," he responded, "you are facing overwhelming odds. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated according to the conventions of war." Mitchell's laugh was audible even through the static of interstellar communication. "Admiral, you still don't understand. Humans don't surrender. We adapt." What happened next would be remembered as one of the most audacious tactical maneuvers in the history of space warfare. Instead of engaging the alien fleet directly, the Indomitable began broadcasting detailed technical specifications of Zephyrian ship systems that it should have had no way of obtaining. "Attention, all human vessels in the system," came Mitchell's voice over the open channel. "The enemy flagship uses a rotating frequency shield grid with a 7-second refresh cycle. Primary weapon systems show thermal buildup after sustained firing. Optimal engagement range is 4,000 kilometers where their point defense systems create mutual interference." Admiral Thexkar stared at his tactical display in shock. The human commander was revealing detailed knowledge of Zephyrian military technology that was classified at the highest levels. How could a species they had never encountered before possess such information? "Sir," called out his intelligence officer, "she's broadcasting our complete ship specifications, including classified defensive systems and operational procedures." "How is this possible?" The answer came in the form of additional transmissions from other locations throughout the system. The merchant vessel in the outer system revealed itself to be carrying advanced sensor arrays that had been analyzing alien ship systems for hours. More shocking still, similar intelligence was being transmitted from the surface of the planet, where human colonists had apparently been monitoring and analyzing alien technology throughout the entire engagement. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, working from a concealed bunker deep beneath New Shanghai Colony, was coordinating the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in human history. Using improvised sensor equipment and the analytical capabilities of several dozen civilian engineers and scientists, the colonists have been systematically cataloging every aspect of Zephyrian technology they could observe. Colonel Park, she reported over their secure communication network, "We've identified major vulnerabilities in their orbital bombardment systems. Their targeting computers use predictive algorithms that can be confused by coordinated electromagnetic interference. If our ships can generate the right frequency patterns, we can effectively blind their weapons systems." Park's response carried a note of amazement. "Doctor, how the hell did you figure all this out while we've been fighting for our lives down here?" "Because that's what humans do," Hawkins replied simply. "We adapt. We learn. We turn our enemies' advantages against them. And we never, ever give up." The intelligence being gathered and transmitted from New Shanghai Colony represented more than just tactical advantage. It was proof of something that the Zephyrian command structure was only beginning to understand. Humans approached warfare with a fundamentally different mindset than any species they had previously encountered. Where other species fought to achieve specific objectives with minimal losses, humans fought to learn everything possible about their enemies while inflicting maximum cost for any aggression. Every battle, even those they lost, became an opportunity to gather intelligence and develop countermeasures. Commander Mitchell aboard the Indomitable was putting this intelligence to use in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. Instead of engaging in direct combat with superior forces, she was using her ship's advanced sensor systems and communication arrays to coordinate a real-time analysis of alien capabilities that was being transmitted to every human world within communication range. "Mr. Constantine," she ordered, "prepare to implement Pattern Delta. Full sensor sweep of the alien formation, with particular attention to power distribution and shield harmonics." "Captain," her tactical officer interjected, "Pattern Delta will expose us to concentrated fire from the entire alien fleet. We can't survive that kind of engagement." Mitchell nodded calmly. "No, we can't. But that's not the objective. The objective is to gather enough tactical intelligence to ensure that the next human fleet to encounter these aliens will have every possible advantage." It was a decision that epitomized everything the aliens didn't understand about human nature. Mitchell was prepared to sacrifice her ship and crew not for victory in this engagement, but for the long-term strategic advantage of her species. She was turning her destroyer into a sensor platform and intelligence-gathering tool, accepting destruction as the price for knowledge that might save other human lives. Admiral Thexkar watched the human destroyer begin its impossible attack run with a mixture of tactical appreciation and growing dread. The human commander was implementing a strategy that made no sense from any conventional military perspective, yet somehow felt terrifyingly effective. "All ships, prepare to engage the human vessel," he ordered. "But maintain formation integrity. This could be a diversion for additional human forces." As the first exchange of fire began between the Indomitable and the Zephyrian fleet, three things became clear that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. First, human technology was more advanced than Zephyrian intelligence had predicted, allowing a single destroyer to engage multiple alien vessels simultaneously while maintaining structural integrity. Second, human tactical doctrine was based on principles that transcended individual survival, making human forces unpredictable and far more dangerous than their numbers suggested. Third, and most importantly, humans possessed an adaptive intelligence that turned every encounter into a learning experience that benefited their entire species. Even in defeat, they were gathering victory. The battle for New Shanghai Colony had become something far more significant than a single planetary conquest. It had become humanity's first lesson in galactic warfare, and the aliens were discovering that humans were terrifyingly fast learners. The Earth Defense Force destroyer Indomitable lasted exactly 17 minutes against the concentrated firepower of the Zephyrian fleet. When her shields finally collapsed and her hull began to buckle under the alien bombardment, Commander Sarah Mitchell made her final transmission to human space with the calm professionalism of someone who had accomplished exactly what she set out to do. This is Indomitable to all Earth Defense Force vessels. We have completed full tactical analysis of hostile forces. Data package is being transmitted on all military frequencies. Enemy capabilities are confirmed as previously reported. New Shanghai Colony continues to resist. Earth Defense Force combat protocols are hereby updated with all intelligence gathered. Mitchell out. The destroyer's destruction sent a shockwave through both fleets, but for very different reasons. Admiral Thexkar watched the expanding debris field with something approaching unease. In 17 minutes of combat, the humans had gathered and transmitted more tactical intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities than most species managed to collect over years of conflict. Sir, reported his communications officer, we've detected multiple hyperspace signatures approaching from 3 different vectors. The humans weren't bluffing about reinforcements. Thexkar studied the tactical display with growing alarm. What emerged from hyperspace wasn't the massive fleet he had feared, but something potentially worse. A coordinated task force that clearly knew exactly what they were facing and had come prepared for this specific enemy. The Earth Defense Force battle group that entered the new Shanghai system consisted of only 12 ships, but their formation and approach vectors demonstrated intimate knowledge of Zephyrian tactical doctrine. They moved with the precision of forces that had been planning for this engagement for months rather than days. Captain Elena Vasquez of the heavy cruiser Yorktown studied the tactical intelligence transmitted by the destroyed Indomitable while her fleet assumed attack formation. The data was comprehensive enough to revolutionize human understanding of alien technology and specific enough to exploit immediately. All ships, this is Yorktown, she transmitted her task force. Pattern recognition indicates enemy ships 7, 12, and 23 are flagships with enhanced command capabilities. Priority targeting is authorized. Implement countermeasures package Delta 7 based on Indomitable sensor analysis. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. The human fleet engaged using tactics specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities that shouldn't have been known to exist, targeting systems with precision that suggested months of preparation rather than improvised strategy. Admiral Thexkar found himself fighting an enemy that seemed to know his ships better than he did. Human weapons targeted specific subsystems with impossible accuracy. Their electronic warfare systems disrupted Zephyrian communications using frequency patterns that were classified military secrets. Most disturbing of all, human formations anticipated Zephyrian maneuvers with the precision of forces that had access to enemy battle plans. How are they doing this? He demanded of his tactical staff. They're exploiting weaknesses in our systems that we didn't know existed. The answer came from his intelligence officer, who had been analyzing the engagement data with growing horror. Sir, the humans have been conducting systematic analysis of our technology since the moment we arrived in this system. Every minute of ground combat, every orbital bombardment, every tactical maneuver, they've been studying us. Dr. Zinthara, monitoring the battle from her laboratory aboard the flagship, was witnessing something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of Zephyrian expansion doctrine. Humans weren't just fighting to win individual battles. They were fighting to understand their enemies so completely that future victories became inevitable. This is unprecedented, she transmitted to the Hegemony High Council. The humans are treating this engagement as a learning exercise. They're willing to accept massive casualties in exchange for tactical intelligence that will benefit their entire species. It's strategically brilliant and completely insane. On the surface of New Shanghai Colony, the sounds of space battle filtered down through the atmosphere as streaks of light marked the destruction of ships from both fleets. Sarah Chun and her fellow colonists continued their impossible defense of the underground complex, now sustained by the knowledge that their sacrifice had meaning beyond their immediate survival. "Sarah, we're getting reports from the surface," called Colonel Park over the communication network. "Human ships are engaging the alien fleet. The cavalry's here." Sarah Chun felt a surge of emotion that she hadn't allowed herself to experience in days. Hope. Not just for survival, but for victory. How many ships? 12 confirmed. Not enough to guarantee victory, but enough to make the aliens reconsider their position. And get this, our intelligence gathering has been so effective that our ships are tearing through their formations like they're using our own battle plans against us. The human fleet's assault was indeed proving devastatingly effective, but at a terrible cost. Captain Vasquez watched her tactical display as 3 more of her ships sustained critical damage. They were winning, but barely, and only because of the intelligence purchased with the lives of the colonists below and the crew of the Indomitable. "Captain," reported her tactical officer, "enemy flagship is breaking formation. They're withdrawing toward the hyperspace limit." Vasquez felt a moment of fierce satisfaction. "All ships pursue and engage. We end this here." But Admiral Thexkar had one final lesson to learn about human nature. As his flagship prepared to enter hyperspace, he received a transmission from the human fleet that would haunt Zephyrian strategic planning for generations to come. "Admiral Thexkar," came Captain Vasquez's voice across the void. "This is Captain Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force. You came to our space seeking easy conquest. Instead, you've given us something far more valuable. Complete understanding of your capabilities, your tactics, and your weaknesses. Every human world now knows how to defeat you." She paused, and when she continued, her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You can retreat today, but you can never surprise us again. We know your ships, your weapons, your strategies, and we'll be waiting for you wherever you go next. You picked a fight with the wrong species, Admiral. Humans don't just defend our worlds. We learn from every attack and become stronger." The truth of her words was already manifesting across human space. The tactical intelligence gathered during the Battle of New Shanghai was being transmitted to every human world, every defense installation, every ship. What had been an alien advantage based on superior technology and battle-tested tactics was becoming a human advantage based on complete understanding of enemy capabilities. Admiral Thexkar's flagship escaped into hyperspace, carrying with it the scattered remnants of what had once been a conquering fleet. Of the 37 ships that had attacked New Shanghai Colony, only 14 remained operational enough to attempt withdrawal. The others had been destroyed or captured by a human force less than half their size. But the most devastating casualty wasn't measured in ships or personnel. It was the loss of Zephyrian technological and tactical superiority that had made their expansion possible. In a single engagement, humanity had acquired enough intelligence to neutralize advantages that had taken the hegemony millennia to develop. Dr. Zinthara compiled her final report on human capabilities while the flagship limped toward hegemony space. Her conclusions would revolutionize alien understanding of this new species and its potential threat to galactic stability. "Human psychological profile requires complete revision," she wrote. "This species does not fight for conquest, territory, or resources. They fight for principles, family, freedom, and the protection of their own kind. This makes them far more dangerous than any species we have previously encountered." She paused, considering the implications of her observations. Recommendation: avoid all contact with human space until alternative strategies can be developed. Conventional conquest doctrine is ineffective against this species. They appear to view every military engagement as an educational opportunity, making each encounter more costly than the last. The report that reached the Zephyrian Hegemony High Council 3 weeks later would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. For the first time in their recorded history, the hegemony would abandon expansion into an entire sector of space based on the actions of a single species. On New Shanghai Colony, the aftermath of victory was subdued by the knowledge of how much it had cost. Nearly 40% of the colonists had died defending their home, and the surface installations would take years to rebuild. But Sarah Chun, emerging from the tunnels for the first time in weeks, looked up at the clear alien sky and felt something that made the sacrifice worthwhile, the absolute certainty that her daughter would grow up free. Colonel Park conducted the memorial service for the fallen in the colony's main assembly area, addressing a gathering that included surviving colonists, Earth Defense Force personnel, and even some crew members from Captain Sanos's merchant vessel who had chosen to remain and help with reconstruction efforts. We gather today not just to mourn our losses, but to recognize what we accomplished, he said, his voice carrying across the scarred landscape. We faced an enemy that had conquered dozens of worlds, and we not only stopped them, we made sure they can never threaten human space with the same advantages again. He gestured toward the horizon, where debris from the space battle still streaked across the sky. Every person who died in these tunnels, every ship that was lost in the battle above, contributed to something larger than our individual survival. They made sure that no other human world would face the same disadvantages we did. They turned our defense into humanity's first victory in galactic warfare. The words carried across human space through hyperspace communication networks, along with detailed after-action reports, tactical analyses, and technological intelligence that would reshape human military doctrine. The Battle of New Shanghai had ended, but its consequences were just beginning. Within 6 months, every human world would be equipped with defenses specifically designed to counter Zephyrian technology. Within a year, human exploration fleets would be carrying weapons and sensors capable of defeating any known alien threat. The species that had been seen as easy prey had transformed itself into something that even the most established galactic powers would think twice about challenging. But perhaps most importantly, the battle had revealed something about human nature that would echo through interstellar politics for centuries to come. Humanity didn't just fight to win. They fought to ensure that their enemies could never threaten them the same way again. Every attack on a human world became a lesson in human capabilities. Every victory against human forces became intelligence that would be used against future aggressors. The Zephyrian hegemony had come to New Shanghai, seeking easy conquest and resource extraction. Instead, they had encountered something they had never faced before, a species that treated war as education and defeat as merely preparation for inevitable victory. Sarah Chun stood in the ruins of her hydroponic garden, holding her daughter and looking up at the stars that no longer seemed distant and threatening. Somewhere out there, other alien species were learning about what had happened at New Shanghai Colony. Some would be discouraged from aggression by the demonstrated cost of attacking human space. Others would be inspired to test their own capabilities against this new species. But all of them would be facing a humanity that was no longer naive about the dangers of galactic civilization. The species that had reached for the stars with open hands and peaceful intentions had learned to fight with the same determination and ingenuity that had carried them across the cosmos. The galaxy had gained a new major power, one that would be defined not by its willingness to conquer, but by its absolute refusal to surrender. The Battle of New Shanghai had ended, but the age of human expansion was just beginning. And across the vast distances between stars, the message that emerged from this single colonial world was being received by every intelligence agency, military command, and political authority in known space. Humans do not surrender. They adapt, they learn, and they remember. Attack them at your own peril, because they will turn your advantages into their strengths and your victories into their lessons. The war that the Zephyrian hegemony thought they were starting was over. The era of human space was about to begin.